Hi everyone, this is Nick from AVLI, and today I have the pleasure of talking to you about one of my favorite online applications, and this is none other than Hypothesis. Hypothesis is an annotation tool that integrates with the web page that you're on, and it allows users either individually or collectively to annotate a web page. Now, it seems like that might be something that is limited at the beginning, but when you consider the breadth of what's on the web and you consider what it is that you, particularly if you're a one-to-one school and you're looking for ways to use the computer, what it is you would actually want a student to be able to do, Hypothesis just comes into play and is pretty indispensable at this point, particularly with the online only learning or the distance remote learning. If indeed if you're a brick and mortar school and you go back to school in the fall and end up having to quarantine again, to do so without Hypothesis to me would be a huge mistake. It is absolutely indispensable for that. So let's jump in and see what happens here. So essentially, with Hypothesis, to get started, you create a profile and you hit get started, and you end up downloading an extension for your Chrome browser, and then you are finished with this page for good. Okay, and what the extension allows you to do, let's just go to my Shakespeare here. What the extension allows you to do is when you are on particular pages that you want your students to annotate, you click on the Hypothesis button up here, and you now have the option to make annotations on the actual page and then create notes over here. So one application, of course, would be like you could ask a student. You can see here what we were doing. That one question I asked was, how does Shakespeare appeal to both the upper and lower classes? And this student has highlighted a particular part and then explained how these particular lines that he highlighted does that. Okay, and the rule that I had was once one person has kind of claimed a line, you cannot go and use any of that anymore. And so other students had to answer other questions. We obviously had several questions. This one chose number one. This student chose number four. And you had to find an example of that. And then later, I created a discussion board where you actually had to respond to an annotation that a classmate made. Okay, and so what's great about this is if you are, let's say, an English teacher, history teacher, even religion, and you are giving your students something to read the night before they come to class. And we've all been to school, we've all been to high school and college, and know the culture of kind of half reading or convincing yourself that you read, or even like knowing full well that you didn't read, but figuring out how to make it look like you read in class the next day. I remember I had a teacher in high school, and when I was in high school, we only had the regular bound book, and she would come around and check to see that you had underlined stuff. And so one good way to make sure that she thought that you read the book, students would just like right before class sort of underline 50 random lines in the chapter, right? Just like, oh, here, let's do these 3 lines and then like this one. And so when she came through and looked, she would go up and down the rows. When she came in through and looked, it looked to her as if everyone had read. And then if you had one or two sort of pet ideas in your head, you could, when those came up, you could raise your hand and make it look like you had read and never do the reading, or only partially do it, or read Spark Notes or whatever. With this, there is no real way around it, because since the Shakespeare is online, everybody is editing the same document. Sorry, everybody's annotating the same document. So there's no way, like, they actually have to go into the specific text that is here. They don't all have their own individual books. It's as if everyone has one book. They're all reading it. They're all annotating it. And when they do that, you can see, and I just sort of said that one of the rules was they had to put their actual first and last name as their username in order to get credit, right? So these guys went through, answered these questions and had to do so by reading specifically the exact text. So they couldn't just look at SparkNotes because they would have to come back here then and apply it to this particular page. So if you say, okay, I'm going to take a hypothesis in conjunction with something like Project Gutenberg, which has just every book that is public domain or where the copyright has expired. So let's just say we're going to do Frankenstein. I'll type in Frankenstein here, and I'm going to do this version of Frankenstein. We're going to have the HTML, and right here, okay, you can already see that people have done this, and publicly speaking, there are 254 annotations on this exact version of Frankenstein. And obviously this person was meant to put secondary sources down. So here you can go in and actually look at what the secondary sources are that go to specific spot here in the book. Hypothesis also gives you the option of creating a group. And so you can actually make it, I had a group called Sophomore English and another group called AP English. And you could just go, like, you would click here, and instead of public, you would click on whatever class, and then only your classes will show up, and it won't get mixed in with all the public ones, which is a great idea. So you could maybe, I mean, like, I know that there's debate about whether students can read on the screen, whether they can read with e-readers, or whether they actually need the hardbound book. I sort of fall in the middle. I guess I sort of prefer a book, but I think that when people say they can't read on a screen or they can't read an e-reader, they've probably never tried it. I mean, I read books on an e-reader all the time, and it's totally fine. I remember everything. I know exactly what happened in the story. It doesn't seem a whole lot different than a book. And like to say they can't read this, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't totally buy that. I read stuff online all the time. They read newspaper articles online all the time, and they read emails. To say that you can't read on the screen would be an argument to get rid of email altogether and go back to like writing handwritten letters. So you could do something where you have this, you might have a particular, like a primary or secondary text. Let's say you're teaching history on here, and they also have the option of printing it out or buying it as well if they needed to, if they have trouble reading online. I have had 2 or 3 students a year come up to me and say, I have difficulty reading online, or it's hard for me to stay on task because all I have to do is go up here and click one of my buttons at the top, and I'm hot linked over to another website, and I never quite do it. That's fine. They then have the option to go to the school library and get the book, or buy the book, or whatever. But as far as the annotation goes, they would do so on the annotation page that we're all using. So they could read in the book, and when they get to a part that they think answers the question or whatever it is you're asking them to do, they Control F, they type in the quote, and it'll take them to that exact spot, and then they can make their annotation here. And not being a science teacher, it's hard for me to comment, but you don't only have to do this on words. So you can actually go to websites and annotate pictures. You can go to say something like YouTube, or if I was trying to teach someone how to use I don't know, any sort of online application, like let's just say Google, you could actually do a step-by-step, or you could annotate each little thing and tell the user what that does or what it means. And so let's just say I was trying to teach my grandmother or someone's grandmother, I guess, how to do Gmail, how to make a web search. I could go over here and create a group just for me and her, and then actually annotate these different parts. Like, what does this do? What does this do? What is this? What is this? What is this? And then when she opened this and hovered over the different spots, it would show her what each thing did, and it would actually kind of give her directions as to how to use the particular web page. If you are using say like an online application that demonstrates like centrifugal or centripetal acceleration or something like that, the student can go in under the captions underneath the picture even and debate, what's being said, or highlight something or whatever. And so a lot of what we worry about that's lost when we are doing remote learning is solved by hypothesis, or at least we're able to sort of hold each other accountable for what it is we're saying we're doing as a group. And so in that sense, hypothesis, there's no real, I mean, there are other annotation applications, annotate being one of them. But for me, hypothesis is just very easy to use and something that all of my students get a lot out of. One thing that we actually did this year that you might want to try is I went on Twitter and I challenged anybody who wanted into kind of like an annotate competition of a specific dystopian book. We were all in, like, if you were in a dystopian unit, my class was in a dystopian unit. Let's match up, our content. Let's match up the book that we're reading, and let's create an assignment that everybody's doing in both classes, and challenge each other to sort of beat the other one, or at least like really get a good dialogue going about this. And I think that that's a really great way to extend the walls of your classroom, to make the assessment or the assignment at least a little bit more authentic for the student, working together with someone that's not just in this brick and mortar classroom. And it made what we were doing even at home more valuable than, hey, read this chapter and then we're going to talk about it, or read this chapter and fill out these questions, or even worse, like read this play by next week and then we're going to write a paper on it. After enough of that, the school work starts to become inauthentic. And the reason that the student's doing it is to get it done. Writing another paper is just like writing the paper before and the paper before. I'm not advocating for getting rid of essays or getting rid of tests altogether necessarily. However, I am advocating for other types of formative assessment and ways to sort of harp on skills while confusing the student with regard to the how you're going to do that. I think that it's extremely important that there is this foundation that the students know is going to happen in a class. And for me, that would be, what are the skills and outcomes that we are going to learn how to do this year? Those don't change. Everybody's clear about that. However, content, assignments, assessments, those things are never going to be the same. I'm not going to do the same thing any one day. And that is something that now becomes difficult when we're now remote learning. Okay. And so hypothesis is just one way that you can change it up, or hypothesis is another thing that can sort of dovetail really well into something else. Like you could do a hypothesis and then a Flipgrid video from that, or, hypothesis into an infographic or whatever. I mean, it just works so well as an internet application that I think you can get into varying what it is that you're doing every day and giving lots of different students lots of different ways to show how they are doing in a particular skill. They are given a bunch of different ways to demonstrate their abilities. So I encourage you to look this over. I would mess with it a little bit individually before just throwing it out there. But also, I mean, it's extremely intuitive, and it's not a horrible idea to say, I've got this set up. I'm not exactly sure how it works. We're all going to figure it out together. I've had good experience with something like that in the past as well. So these students that we have are often better with the digital world than we are. And so challenging them in that aspect is another way to kind of keep it fresh for them and make the schoolwork that they're doing about something other than let's just get this done. In this case, they'd be figuring out how this particular application works. I do think that it's something that will be useful for them after high school, and will be useful for them even after college if they're in jobs and are working in a team. It's a way to annotate asynchronously and sort of everybody work on one thing. Okay, so thanks a lot. I would definitely, again, look over Hypothesis. It's a great, easy to use, intuitive application, and it applies so well to what we're doing, particularly in at-home learning.